What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I'm Jake Chatsky, joined as always by Paul Kilgallen. Paul, another loss from the Jets, a divisional loss at that. The season is slipping away if it hasn't already. How you doing? How you feeling after last night's game?
Yeah, I'm like completely dejected. I'm out here. I'm out on the West Coast, visiting some family for the holiday, and so I had to watch the game on an iPad yesterday because the local favorite team was playing at the same time, and I was just like sitting there in a room full of people with like my AirPods in, watching on an iPad, just like expressionless for 3 hours. It's like it's so predictable and yet still somehow shocking. For the last several weeks, I've kept feeling like, oh, the Jets play up and down to their competition. Like one of these games, they're going to show up and they're going to surprise everybody, and we're going to be back to square one. Where you know, is this team good or is this team not good? And now it feels like the evidence is just really piling up that they're just not very good, pretty much across the board. And just before we started recording here, I just got a text message from my brother, and all it said was 32-6. And so I think that's just, perfect example. Like I'm completely dejected. I can't believe we're here again. It just feels like we've been on a treadmill for 15 years. And I know it's closer to 13 years, but it just feels like we're going nowhere, and we've been going nowhere forever.
Yeah, and it was such a tease at the beginning of this season, too, because even in some of the games we lost, like they were moving the ball, the offense looked, I'm not going to say competent, but like it didn't look like the way it does. And to just go from that to the last three games where offense has been non existent, completely inept, can't find their way into the end zone, it's torturous to watch. And we switched coasts for this game. You're on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast visiting some family, and I was at dinner at my grandma's watching like the third Tim Boyle drive to end in a turnover on my phone, eating like fish dinner with my family, just like, how did I end up here? Um, and I think my initial reaction, and I saw a lot of Jets Twitter address this already last night, but I think everyone is looking for someone to blame for this season. And the real shitty answer of it all is you have to blame everybody. You have to blame, the quarterback stinks. I get that he's a backup, and we'll talk a little bit more about how Zach performs relative to backups, later in this episode. But he's not good. No one is saying that he's good. You can blame him for that. You can blame the skill players and the offensive line. I know they're dealing with a ton of injuries, but the players who are there haven't been performing up to NFL standards. You can blame the offensive coordinator who can't call an offensive drive to save his life right now. You blame the head coach who hired the offensive coordinator and allowed that to happen under his watch, even if the defense is playing out of their minds on any given week. You blame the GM who didn't give him enough ingredients to cook with and the right players to execute this offense. And you blame the owner who either didn't force them to go out and get another quarterback too, or actively forced them to keep Zach Wilson because he was drafted high. From a wholesale level, this is a institutional failure of the Jets. And I think all these fans are looking around at like who's to blame and what to do next. And the shitty truth answer is you got to blow the whole thing up. And I really don't necessarily know where the Jets go from here. I think the easy place to start is obviously last night. I got a little bit of my wish. You got a little bit of yours. Zach Wilson was finally benched for Tim Boyle. And I'll talk a little bit about my side, and then I'll give you the floor, your soapbox to sort of defend your Zach Wilson's takes. But at least from my perspective, I'm happy that they're trying something. Like obviously it may have been even a PR move to just be like, this is why we're not playing Tim Boyle. But you're dangerously approaching a point where like you could lose the locker room if you're Robert Saleh. And so doing nothing is no longer an option. And so my question to you, I guess I should say, is were you surprised that they finally pulled the trigger on the Zach Wilson benching? And the follow up to that is, given how Tim Boyle performed, do you see a world where they finally make the Simeon call up and have him starting some games in the near future?
Oh man, you just said so much in 2 minutes there. So much. I mean, you're right. Like we talked about it last week. Like it's an organizational sickness that runs so deep, and it's everybody's fault. And I texted you last night. Like the difficult position that they're in now with Rodgers is like they're kind of just they're forced to be in a holding pattern. It feels like they're kind of hamstrung with everything that you would want to do, they can't do because Rogers loves Sala and Hackett's his boy and he likes Wilson potentially and like and I texted you this last night, like it just feels like to take an actual airplane jet analogy here, it just feels like we're like an overweight 787 just like circling an airport and we're just running out of fuel and we can't land the thing and like I don't know where to go. And so you know there's a lot of tweets out there trying to assign blame. There's a former player for the Chiefs, Chris Mano, who seems like he's ready to take on the entire fan base on Twitter. He's just absolutely eviscerating everybody. Um, and so to get to Zach Wilson, like I don't know how I can sit on here and continue to defend the kid. My whole basis for that argument was basically I understand that the results are not there, but if I'm trusting my eyes as a person who's watched football for 36, 37 years, I don't see how he is the top problem, right? Like, and that's an old stale take at this point. Like, yes, we have a lot of problems, and the debate has sort of moved into like, what is the biggest problem? Is quarterback the biggest problem of the long list of problems, or is there another one, right? And for me, I keep coming back to, and I'm not sure how far up the chain to go on this one. Like, do I stop at Sala and say this is the place that I'm going to identify it, or do I take it all the way up to JD, or does it go up to ownership? But until this team stops treating offense like it's a risk reduction exercise rather than uh, an offense, right? Like just like the definition of the word, like you should be attacking, right? And for as long as I can remember, the Jets treat offense like it's a risk reduction exercise. And it's just like, how can we limit the damage, right? And we're going to win on defense. And, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is in that situation. You're not going to win like that in the NFL. That all said, I mean, how can I seriously come on here and continue to defend Zach Wilson, right? I don't know how I can anymore. I want to because when I see the eye popping plays and I see him, in my eyes, make not a ton of turnover worthy throws and things like that. And he has physical tools and he's got all this stuff. Um, I want to because I do know that he's more physically talented than anybody else they have on the roster. And yes, they should have gotten a better backup in the offseason or during the season or before the trade deadline or any of the million opportunities that you had to go upgrade the backup quarterback position. You should have done it. But I don't know how I can continue to get on here and say like they should just keep trotting it out and do the same thing because I don't know what other changes you can make. You don't have another competent play caller. You can't fire Hackett. They're in such a difficult position. So I don't know how to answer this question directly. I I mean Tim Boyle. It is what it is, dude. Like you look at somebody put out a tweet last night, like his stats from UConn, which by the way, I'm a UConn graduate. Like Tim Boyle's a UConn legend now. So now we have a guy from my alma mater and a guy from yours who are competing from the job. I think, right? Um, like
Pretty much.
Tim Boyle at UConn and whatever place he transferred to after, and then at the NFL level, like he's upside down on touchdowns and interceptions everywhere. His rating is terrible. Like he's not an NFL quarterback. Simeon is who he is. We kind of know who he is. I know Zach is the most physically talented person at that position that we have on the roster, but like, uh, what else can you do? What else can you do at this point? We can't just watch every single week them do absolutely nothing. It feels like we're watching a different sport. It doesn't feel like we're watching NFL football when we watch the Jets. I watch all these other teams. Everybody knows how to score points, and we just can't score points. So I don't know how I can continue to get on here despite the eye test, despite his physical gifts, despite any other theory you could come up with about, would he force LaFleur out because he chose Wilson over LaFleur and everything else. Like, I just don't know how I can keep saying that you should just keep trotting the kid out because, you know, it's just not working. And I don't know what else to do. And, in my heart of hearts, I think the Jets destroyed him just like they destroyed Sam Darnold. And just like they've destroyed a bunch of other players, right? Like, I don't necessarily believe that the players were ever really the problem here. I do think it's the organization and the way we treat offense and the way we coach and the way that the Jets approach the game of football is just dead wrong. And so while first of all, I took no joy in Tim Boyle sucking last night. Like, the thing I kept texting you, like, every time something bad happened, defense, offense, whatever, I was like, oh, that must have been Zach's fault, right? um, and so, obviously that was completely joking around, tongue in cheek, but like, it's just the blame goes everywhere. I don't know how I can keep defending it at this point, and as far as what they're going to do next, I have no idea. I could genuinely see a world where Salah gets back up there Wednesday and it's like, we don't have enough time to turn around. We're going with Zach again. Or I could see him being completely deactivated and Simeon and Boyle dressing. And it's just, going back to the same mantra as last year. It's like, Zach needs a mental break. He needs to go read a book on a beach. Like, I have no idea where this is going, but it's a full blown dumpster fire.
It certainly is. We're literally in a Jets version of Groundhog's Day, where it's just 2022 all over again. Um, we were going to get to this later, but you brought up Hackett, so I want to address it now. I'm going to pull some stats that our guy NYJ Matt pulled on Twitter. Through 10 games, here's how the Jets currently compare to the Adam Gase 2020 team that I would like to remind everyone was tanking for Trevor Lawrence and easily seen as the worst team in the NFL, even if they didn't end up being the number one pick that season. Through 10 games in 2020, the Jets have 149 points compared to this year 150. They had 167 first downs compared to 147 this year. They'd thrown for 2,686 yards versus 2,700 this year, 1,700 pass yards versus 1,705 this year, 986 rush yards versus 998 this year. And then the killer one that he pointed out was in 2020, they finished dead last in the NFL with a 34% third down conversion rate. This year, they're only converting 22.9% of their third downs. All this to say is that Hackett is historically inept at offense at a level we haven't seen since the Jets had the worst offensive mind in the NFL manning the ship and were tanking for Trevor Lawrence. So I guess my question to you is, I know you said they can't do anything about Hackett. Is their hand going to be forced? I know that the whole thing is Rodgers is coming back and Hackett is his guy. Are they not reaching a point where it's like, no matter who it is, even if it's not Rodgers' guy, it's going to be better than having Hackett there. And the Jets can't waste another year with Hackett at the helm running an offense, expecting everything to go perfect. Do you think they actually make a move, or am I just, holding on to a pipe dream here?
I mean, first of all, it's like objectively hilarious. It's unbelievably, outrageously bad when you put those numbers next to each other. Like, if you went back in a time machine and told yourself 3 years ago, hey, we're gonna fire Gase and we're gonna bring in this whole new regime and we're gonna do all these things, right? And you kind of lined up all the moves that have happened in between then and now, and we're going to draft two wide receivers within the first two rounds. We're going to draft two running backs. We're going to do all this stuff around the offensive line, and the stats are going to be about the same in 3 years. Like, you
Worse,
would, yeah,
potentially worse.
you would not believe it. Like, it's unbelievable how bad it's been, and it's comical, and it's why everybody laughs at the Jets. And so, I always laugh about that, the quote from Christopher Johnson when he hired Gase, that he was coaching football to where offense is going rather than where offense has
Yeah.
been. Like, we were going to run the offense of the future, right? And I think back on that and I laugh because obviously it was so terrible, and now here we are running basically like an offense from the 40s, and it's so bad. It's so bad. I think I would love to like get Rogers in a room and like get him on some truth serum and just be like, dude, like, are we really supposed to keep this guy for you? Like, I know he's your boy, but like, are we really supposed to keep this guy for you? Um, because at some point, it almost becomes a mark against Rogers that like, how can all of your luggage that you brought with you, dude, is killing us. It's killing us. And it's not like we were some shining tower of offense before either. Like I'm not here to say you downgraded, but like it's killing us. Everything you brought with you is killing us. And if you're a rational person who can view this correctly, like you should be able to understand that something needs to be done. And if you can't, like I said, it almost becomes a mark against him. So two more things I wanted to say. Like, um, Connor has brought up the point a few times now of the offense doesn't get to the line with enough time on the play clock to be able to read a defense, make some checks, and do what they need to do in order to run an efficient NFL offense. And that's kind of been getting pinned on Zach, and I'm sure Zach has a hand in that. Like I believe that. The other thing I want to point out is, do you remember last year in Denver